Hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Red Hen Press Poetry Hour, brought to you by Broad at Home. I'm your host, Sandra Tsing Loh, and standing in for the beautiful Broad stage in Santa Monica, it's my messy living room in Pasadena. So before we begin, I remind you that the Red Hen Press Poetry Hour is live because we really do want to hear from you in the comment section on our Facebook page as they go by. We picture you two in your homes, maybe in your silky pajamas, enjoying maybe a very dry kava like I will later, or baking banana bread or puttering around or whatever you do. So do let us know what you're imbibing and enjoying. More importantly, what you think of the poetry in real time as you hear it, and particularly if you have any questions, particularly for our featured poet, who will be with us in the first half, and then will join us at the end of the program to answer all of your questions. We promise no question will go unanswered, so stay to the end. Okay, to kick off, I'd like to welcome co-founder and managing editor of Red Hen Press, Kate Gale. Hello, Kate.
Hi, how are you?
Good. Hi, Kate. And I'd also like to welcome Rob Bayless, artistic and executive director of the Broad Stage. There he is. Hello, Rob.
Hello, everyone.
Oh my goodness, third week in. Isn't that amazing? Okay, so, well, Kate, you have a thought for today?
Well, I'm very excited to have Richard Blanco on. He's written so much about home, and now that we're all stuck in our homes, I'm wondering what he thinks about his love affair with home and how much he's written about home and exile now that we're all sitting stuck in our homes.
Yes, Rob?
Oh my goodness. Well, Richard is an incredible poet. One of the things I was thinking about getting ready for tonight was that, yes, we're stuck at home and everything has gotten very myopic. I mean, you're noticing every last little strand of dust, every last little thing. But I think it's also a time when we are thinking about the nation. And, it seems I find myself going back and forth between the grandest thoughts about our nation and the tiniest thoughts about my couch. So in a sense, I mean, this is a perfect place for poetry, but especially for Richard in the sense that he is one of these poets who has had the rare distinction of addressing the nation directly. So I'm so excited to hear from his perspective tonight and all that he'll bring along with him. It's going to be a great evening.
All right, which brings us to Richard Blanco, our featured poet. Little bio, selected by President Barack Obama. Remember him? As the fifth inaugural poet, joining Robert Frost and Maya Angelou. Blanco is the youngest and the first Latino, immigrant, and gay person to serve in such a role. Blanco's 4 books of poetry include How to Love a Country, City of 100 Fires, Directions to the Beach of the Dead, and Looking for the Gulf Motel. His memoirs, For All of Us, One Today, An Inaugural Poet's Journey. That's the story of getting that phone call and then going to Washington to deliver that amazing poem. And The Prince of Los Cocuyos, a Miami childhood, a winner of a Lambda Literary Award, other honors, Agnes Sterrett Poetry Prize, Beyond Margins Award from the Penn American Center, Patterson Poetry Prize, Thomas Gunn Award. He's a Woodrow Wilson Fellow, and we're so grateful that Richard is joining us tonight from his home in Bethel, Maine, where it is 11:07 at night. Welcome, Richard.
Oh, hey, how are you? Yeah.
Oh.
Great to be here. It is 11, but I'm a night owl, so no problem. One little thing I never put in my bio that is actually also named after Richard Nixon, but that's another story.
Well, we may get to it. And speaking of presidents, I mean, it's sort of the inevitable opening question. In 2013, you gave that incredible inaugural poem at Barack Obama's inauguration for his second term, that beautiful poem, One Today. And there's such a drumbeat of oneness in it. One sun, one light, one ground, one sky, one moon. Then comes the 2016 election of you know who, not really a uniter. And now we're sitting alone in our homes in a pandemic. So, Richard, how do you see the notion of oneness in America today in such a changed time?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I think one of the hard things about the inaugural poem was just to add a little bit of tension right towards the end. So, yes, it is about being one. But it's also realizing that we hadn't quite gotten there yet. I mean, there was still division even back then, right? And it's been growing as we've seen. So that's one thing. But after the divisions just kept on getting bigger and bigger, right? And so my response to that in many ways was this latest book, How to Love a Country, which is also a question mark, right? It's a statement, it's a question mark. It's a self-help book. But in part, it was a response to thinking about that same question. How do we keep on working on that oneness, right? I mean, the book obviously was talking about political divides, divisions of race and gender and all this stuff. I never thought that it would be a pandemic that is actually making us, or that we're seeing all this stuff through the lens of a pandemic now, which is really just completely unexpected. I think the feeling is the same, but we're sort of maybe hopefully being able to see it outside of just the lens of politics, as we've seen, like what are vulnerable communities nowadays. We can see the disparity in economics and all this stuff. So it's really, pandemic, kind of affects everybody's life, right? And so, and so the idea of oneness is, I'm sure many new books and poems have already been spawned, but the idea of oneness is also taking a different shape for me in these days. But I think that, again, the emotion are still the same. It's like, how do we keep on working on that idea of oneness? Because it's, after all, home America, the United States, is still an experiment. It's still a work in progress. So.
Well, and I think that you talk about love of country. You're born to Cuban exile parents. So it's like loving a country because it's the only one that you have, or having lost a country. So I think there's something so poetic in the way that you write about America, almost yearning for an idea of something, maybe rather than what it is exactly. And so I wonder if it's such a favorite poem of mine of yours, America the Beautiful Again, if you would start us off by reading that poem.
Sure, I'd love to. And this is, again, thinking about exactly what you're saying, Sandra, this kind of built-in patriotism that comes from my parents, mostly. I mean, I got here when I was 45 days old and technically an immigrant, but it was still like that sort of contradiction of like some things, the things that you grow up to realize aren't working in our democracy, but also having this heritage of my parents, what they went through to get to this country. So not trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. And in this poem, I'm thinking about patriotism in a different way, that kind of innocent patriotism that when we were kids, before we knew what Democrat or Republican was or anything like that. And for me, that's vested in the song America the Beautiful. So you're going to hear me sing a little bit here. America the Beautiful again. How I sang, oh beautiful, like a psalm at church with my mother, her Cuban accent scaling up every vowel, oh beautiful, yet in perfect pitch, delicate and tuned to the radiant beams of stained glass light. How she taught me to fix my eyes on the crucifix as we sang our thanks to our Savior for this country that saved us. Our voices, hymns as passionate as the organ piping towards the very heavens. How I sang, for spacious skies, closer to those skies while perched on my father's sunbeat shoulders, towering above our first 4th of July parade. How the timber through our bodies mingled, breathing, singing as one with the brass notes of the marching band playing the only song he ever learned in English. How I dared sing it at assembly with my teenage voice cracking for amber waves of grain that I'd never seen, nor the purple mountain majesties, but could imagine them in every verse rising from my gut, every exclamation of praise. I belted out until my throat hurt. America, and again, America. How I began to read Nietzsche and doubt God, yet still wished for God to shed his grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherhood. How I still want to sing, despite all the truth of our wars and our gunshots ringing louder than our school bells, our politicians smiling lies at the mic, the deadlock of our divided voices shouting over each other instead of singing together. How I want to sing again, beautiful or not, just to be in harmony from sea to shining sea with the only country I know enough to sing for. I know you like that one.
I'm menopausal, so I do cry a lot, and I'm just weeping because just the idea of being able to want to love America again and sing that song, it's just okay.
No matter how bad things sometimes get, there's always some little part of me that always is rooting for myself and for this country, right? And that poem, I just had to go back to what was that purest moment. That I can remember feeling that like I said, that pure sense of patriotism in the positive, most purest way, that sense of just loving the ideas we were taught,
Yeah, and you talk, as we'll know in a moment, about the interconnectedness of all these people, that sometimes you can see America just with that connection with somebody on the bus or at the post office, et cetera, et cetera. Station break for a moment. If you're just joining us, this is the Red Hen Press Poetry Hour, brought to you by The Broad at Home. I'm Sandra Tsing Loh. Our featured poet tonight is Richard Blanco, and we're streaming to you, I see, live on Facebook. Let me give Richard, if you don't mind, a few shout outs as we do. Kazim Alam, Ali talks about Cuban rum, Julie Greenfield, Marion Williams, Jay Fly, Rita Zar, Francisco Aragón will be joining us later, Gina Cronstadt, hey, Siri Butler, Charles Harper Webb, hey, Cindy Rude, Emma Trails, Donna Petrie, Marion Williams, Mark Abel, Blas Falconer will be joining us, and Ellen Lutwak just finished the Saturday Night Seder and then is joining us now. So that's a lovely evening. Ellie Brimmill, Madstein Woods, Rochelle Newman, and others. So there's so many. So I'll try to give you a shout out.
Yeah, I'm watching it. It's great.
Okay. But first, another interview prompt. So when Kate first announced that we do that you were joining this evening, she got email immediately from like 20 poets saying, this is what you have to ask Richard. And she sculpted together in a So I'll say it as though I were Kate. Richard, you've written so much about home and exile, about our desire for a home, a querencia, a place we come back to. But now we Americans have had enough of home and we want to get out. We want to go to the park, to the club, to another town. We want to drive, to ride the subway. And sure, we want to get out of our home. Why does home seem less appealing when we get too much of it?
Well, it's of course something I've been thinking about a lot myself as well. And this idea or this irony of what I'm calling like being exiled at home. So we spend our lives sort of trying to get away from the world, right? Like we're building our homes, our literal homes, and a place of peace and respect, and like to shut the world off, right? And we kind of need that, we do need that. But what this is making me realize is that home is not just our home; it's actually community. It's really the larger, and it's part of the equation of home, right? It's not just it's just not our immediate boundary, and something that we've taken for granted. Right now, we're suddenly seeing a trip to the grocery store and saying hello to the cashier that you've seen 20 years and you just never even acknowledged, right? How our sense of home, we're pack animals. We need. Hence, that's why we're doing this. At least this is some kind of connection, right? So it's really this great irony that I'm also realizing how much I also feel like I'm in exile, almost like under house arrest, like almost like Napoleon and Elba. I don't know, like it feels like you're just like literally you're exiled from the United States, but you're still in the United States, right? Or you're still in your own town or your own city. And the world just seems so unattainable that you might as well be on another end. You might as well have been exiled on another part of the planet. And that's all very fascinating. And it's really making my mind buzz as far as, these ideas of home, right?
And if there was one thing you could do right now, leave your home and do what would it be?
I would just love to have. I would pay $30 for a martini at a bar with a bunch of friends. To be honest, just socializing. I mean, as writers, we're basically. So my day to day hasn't changed that much in terms of being at my desk. Being basically in quarantine. But so I miss the social aspect because I would work all day hard to be able to meet friends, have a drink, go to dinner, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the one thing I just really miss. Well, I guess it's community too, right? Friendship and community. I miss those those human connections. I think we all do, but that's the one thing I would.
Well,
no more. I'm having quarantinis. That's not the same thing. That is not the same thing.
Well,
My partner and I having a drink at home is not the same thing.
Well, and I think also the sense of community, because I can see some of your fellow and sister poets sort of, they're getting ready to read in the second half, and there's shout outs between themselves and they're between each other, and some, like Gina says, this is about balance, the home and life, and people, Laura Tate says it's beautiful, Rita Zar says it's beautiful, and Ali Brimhall says, so happy to be watching this. Events like this are so needed right now. And Chris Carmen is watching from Iowa City. Hello, Chris. Quarantini.
Yeah, Francisco wants a quarantini also.
We'll take any kind of genie. And do you find, I mean, you're right, like, does it change your writing if you can't go in and out? Do you have like a routine, like some writers really have to have the gym or something? Or how do you feel that this affects your writing this time?
Well, I think the one thing I've noticed, and I don't know if this will be a permanent thing, but I've never wanted to write. I've never been in the situation where I'm trying to write about something while it's still happening, right? So, I mean, 9/11 happens, or the Boston Marathon bombings happen, or Sandy Hook happens, and then you process, and it's the aftermath, right? And I'm trying to write my coronavirus poem, and I just keep on battling it, because I'm like, tomorrow is a new discovery, or a new sensation, or a new feeling. And that is really interesting. I've never had to be in the process of constantly changing emotions, and not only interior, but things that are happening around the world and exterior, waking up and feel like you're saying, like, forgetting for an hour that there's even anything going on in the world, and worrying about buying new pillows for the sofa, and then suddenly realize, oh shit, the world's falling apart. and that has been an interesting to me, in the ways also of almost, I think, as writers, our first inclination is always to go to the page. And for the first time ever in my life, I said, maybe it's time to just be a little quiet for a little while. And I've never had that feeling. In other words, take it in, and that's all right. Poems will come. It's not like I'm not writing, but it's, I think that's the first instance that I've ever sort of, that impulse has changed or has been affected in a different way. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. That's the one thing I've really noticed has changed my sense of writing or coming to the page.
Well, speaking of writing in the middle of something, I mean, it was interesting when Trump got elected, that I think you kind of put the question to yourself. You'd written in a Obama inauguration poem, if you were called by the Trump White House to read a poem at Trump's inauguration, yeah, I think you gave yourself that kind of assignment. And how did that go for you?
Well, yeah, it was about a month before the election, but I had a sixth sense that he was going to get elected. And so I gave myself that assignment just as an exercise, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it because, as I say, I couldn't spoof a spoof. There was no angle. There was no way into it. But it did generate 3 poems in thinking about thinking about our country again, thinking about place, home, belonging, who we are. And so this is one of the poems that sort of like spurred off of that assignment. And it's called Declaration of Interdependence. And it, even though again it's sort of talking about political divide, I think, now that we're seeing it through the lens, what I'm looking at this poem now is like how much we haven't been appreciating about each other simply because of we're different parties, right? How much we've been sort of in a different way socially distancing each other through politics. And so this was an attempt to sort of think about our common humanity. And yeah, so good. Yeah. It's called Declaration of Interdependence. And these are excerpts from the Declaration of Independence. Such has been the patient sufferance, where mother's bread, instant potatoes, milk at a checkout line, where her 3 children pleading for bubble gum and their father, where the 3 minutes she steals to page through a tabloid, needing to believe even stars' lives are as joyful as bruised. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. Where her second job, serving an executive absorbed in his Wall Street Journal at a sidewalk cafe, shadowed by skyscrapers, where the shadow of the fortune he won and the family he lost, where his loss and the lost, where father in a coal town who can't mind a life anymore because too much and too little has happened for too long. A history of repeated injuries and usurpations. Where the grit of his main street's blacked out windows and graffitied truths, where street in another town, lined with royal palms, at home with a Peace Corps couple who collect African art, where their dinner party talk of wines, wielded picket signs and burned draft cards, where what they know, it's time to do more than read the New York Times, buy fair trade coffee and organic corn. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress. We're the farmer who grew that corn, who plows into his couch as worn at his back by the end of the day, where his TV set blaring news having everything, nothing to do with the field dust in his eyes, or his son nested in the ache of his arms. We're his son. We're a black teenager who drove too fast or too slow, talked too much or too little, moved too quickly, but not quick enough. With the blast of the bullet leaving the gun, with the guilt and the grief of the cop who wished he hadn't shot. We mutually pledged to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. We mutually pledged to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. We're the dead. We're the living amid the flicker of candlelight. We're in a dim cell with an inmate reading Dostoevsky, where his crime, his sentence, his amends, we're the mending of ourselves and others. We're Buddhists serving soup at a shelter alongside a stockbroker. We're each other's shelter and hope, a widow's 50 cents in a collection plate, and a golfer's $10,000 pledge for a cure. We hold these truths to be self-evident. We're the cure for the hatred caused by our despair. We're the good morning of a bus driver who remembers our name, the tattooed man who gives up his seat on the subway, where every door held open with a smile when we look into each other's eyes, the way we behold the moon. We're the moon. We're the promise of one people, one breath, declaring to one another, I see you. I need you. I am you. So, I think we lost. I can't.
It's,
Oh, there you go, Sandra. I think I
Yeah.
can say, okay, yeah, got you now.
yes, it's so incredible, the oneness between us, and thank you. And I just their shout outs from Detroit is in the house, like, and Julian Fleischer from upstate New York is watching. Pam Lanston, Laser. We are Hermel Aragal. We said we are each other's shelter. Donald Petrie. It's just so it's just there's so much, just it's so beautiful. So thank you, Richard. So that is the first part of the program. Richard is going to hang out and then come back at the very end, right before 9 o'clock, for the final hurrah. And your yes, and so you'll come back and maybe
I'm gonna have a quarantine and enjoy the show now.
and then you'll come back.
And then I'll be there.
Great. In case you're just joining us, this is the Red Hen Press Poetry Hour, brought to you by Broad at the Broad at Home. I'm your host, Sandra Tsing Loh. We can see you're streaming live, so thank you for joining us. We can see you all, and I agree, so fabulous, so moving. So now in this section, which is sort of our second half, we'll hear from more poets, both live and on video. And first up, here's a poem on video from Tess Taylor.
Hi, I'm Tess Taylor, and today I'm going to read for you from a book called Rift Zone, which is out this April, and which has to do partly with living on a fault line where the earth is tearing apart. This poem is called Train Through Colma. But will anyone teach the new intelligence to miss the apricot trees that bloomed each spring along these tracks? Or the way afternoons blazed with creosote and ponderosa? Spring evenings flare with orange pixels in the bay-scented valley. Where in the algorithm will they account for the rippling ponies that roamed outside Fremont? When the robots have souls, will they feel longing? When they feel longing, will they write poems? And this is an earthquake poem from 1989, when the Loma Prieta quake stopped us from doing what we wanted to do. Loma Prieta, 1989. Then in chorus up the risers rose, and for a moment we were riding high and tottering on the bareback crust. We were girls preparing for a concert, and even when the raw ground, skip that one. This poem is called Elk at Tamales Bay. Nimble, preserved together, milkweed white rears upturned, the female Tule elk bowed into rustling foxtails. Males muscled over the slopes, jostling mantles, marking terrain. Their antlers clambered wide, steep as open gorges. As they fed, those branches twitched, sensory, delicate, yet as one buck reared his head, squaring to look at us, his antlers and his gaze held suddenly motionless. Further out the skeleton, the tar paper it seemed to lie on was hide. Vertebrae like redwood stumps, an uneven heart-shaped cavern, a coccyx curled to its tip. Ribs fanned open, hollow, emptied of organs. In the bushes its skull, sockets and mandible, sinuses, loose teeth. All bare now except that fur, the red-brown color of a young boy's head, and also of wild iris stalks in winter, still clung to the drying scalp. Below, the eye's rim sagged, flat as a bicycle tire. The form was sinking away, the skin loosened, becoming other, shedding the mask that hides but must also reveal a creature. Off amid cliffs and hills, some unfleshed force roamed free. In the wind I felt the half-life I watched watch me. Elk, I said, I see you abandon this life, this earth. I stood for a time with the bones. I wanted to read this poem about picking blackberries in a bit of a hard season. Wishing you all fruit. Song with wild plum and thorn. The morning is cold and the world is hard, but even in fog, it is still midsummer. The kids need to play and the grocery budget ticks towards nothing, the way the world tips towards doomsday. The walls in my chest will not let me breathe, and all the screens flicker and still answer nothing, so I take the children down to the bike path with buckets and a few blessed hours, and wander a corridor of weedy fruit. Blackberry, wild plum all overhung, we, leaners or gleaners half acrobatic, lost among boughs, alone till I notice others stopping, with buckets or tiffins, in many languages along these tracks, picking what weeds we still hold in common, as dry heat builds and fog thins. In common, the word seems strangely radical, crumb or bloom beyond loneliness. For a while, I feel entirely animal, little forager hungry for fruit. Black sparkle, pale pit and thorn, weeds binding some world together. A word appears in my mind. Hold fast, sprout, raw volunteer. For a while it is hand to mouth and to bucket, breathing, still here. Thanks.
Hello. We are back. That was the wonderful Tess Taylor. And this is the Broad stage at Broad at Home, the Red Hen Press Poetry Hour. And next we're going to have, coming to you live, Blas Falconer.
Hi. Thank you, Sandra. I'm going to read a few poems, but first I wanted to thank you. I want to thank the Broad Stage and Red Hen Press for bringing us all together. And I'd like to dedicate this reading to my students at San Diego State University, who remind me each week how important community is and how important it is to reach out to one another in times of crisis. I'm going to read I'm going to read 3 poems, all of which were inspired by that notion. The first poem is from my first book, A Question of Gravity and Light, and the poem is titled The Battle of Nashville. Snow gives the sky a new dimension, depth, a soft glow, as if the air lit the yard, which slopes to the city, which shimmers. The river is always moving, but the atrium on Fifth, the crest, where blacks locked arms and would not budge. A plow takes the hill, where cars line up in rows and half-built lofts replace the houses. The man who built our house built diesel engines and kept the trucks he couldn't fix. His daughters sold it all, except the how-to books, the shop fan he left in the attic. We're not brave, but we find one another in bed each night, your hand or my hand reaching out. In the morning, you take the trash and I make the coffee. Nearby, battles were fought and men whose wives waited for them died. If soldiers held the highest ground, one stood here. If there is one, there is at least one more. Standing shoulder to shoulder, they share a blanket as snow settles in the trees. I think they are afraid. I think this is love. The second poem I'm going to read is from my second collection. It's called The Foundling Wheel. And the poem is titled Lighter. And the title moves right into the poem. Lighter. Lighter, the word that comes to mind after many nights, as when a plane descends over a city you call home. The bodies rise against the belt strung across your lap. Darkness and lampposts like gold and silver beads below, falling into them. Or better yet, waiting in the bioluminescent bay, and each kick creates a soft glow. Each stroke makes you think light could come from the body and not a world disturbed into brilliance. Because it captures what I mean, both the weight and how you could not see what you could see what you could not. As when I heard him cry and lumbered down the hall to find you there first, pacing the room, singing softly in his ear. Through the window, the city sparkled and seemed to have grown, though by day I never see more than 2 or 3 men working at once, lifting together, say, a plank of wood. Years ago, my mother sat beside my bed, eager to bear the fever with me. We pass him back and forth between us till it breaks, and I no longer want what I wanted before, as when one day you look upon the house you've built and can't recall the field. And for my last poem, I'm going to read from Forgive the body this failure. And the poem is titled Revolution. It's in response to a painting by a Puerto Rican painter named Mirna Baez. And the painting is called Platanal, and it's a landscape of plantain trees, a common landscape in Puerto Rico. And it's dedicated to, or it was written for my grandmother, who often worried about her own homeland. Revolution. Plantain trees gather at the edge of the orchard, clamor for light in the foreground. They seem to grow as one, as if they'd fill the field and the mountains behind them, leaves large and frayed. We stood there once, or someplace like it. So here we are again, it seems, years later, branches leaning over the road, you in your long skirt, looking out as if to recall something you meant to do. My country, I hear you say still. But if that's dusk in the hills, you know what's coming to the field. You'll stand among them till there's nothing left to see. I'll wait beside you, though I don't know what we're waiting for. Thank you.
Thank you, Blas. And now you can have that well-deserved rum, and you can clink Kazim Ali. We'd have it right after you did it. That was so incredible. Thank you so much. And I remind you that in 15 minutes, in just a few minutes, our featured poet Richard Blanco will be back. And people, I'm going to take off my glasses. You can ask him anything in the world. You can ask Richard Blanco anything in the world. So put it in the comments and he will answer it when he comes back in 15 minutes. In the meantime, hello. Emma Trellis is enjoying a Vinotini. Carol Taylor Was is in from Detroit. Red Snowstone, thanks for the shout out to my lipstick. I wasn't sure about it. I think it's a little too bricky. And to the rest of you, thank you. So many I can barely shout out. Blas is running for his drink and he says, thanks for listening, friends. So remember, please, question, Richard Blanco will answer any question that you have. Promise, for the end of the hour. And if you've just tuned in, this is the Red Hen Press Poetry Hour brought to you by Broad at Home. Next up, we have Francisco Aragón, live.
Hello, it's great to be here. I want to thank Kate and the Red Hen Press team and the people at the Broad stage for putting this on, and I'm happy to be in such great company. Tonight I want to read 3 poems from my book, After Ruben, which will be published next in a few weeks in May. And 10 of the poems from the book are actually liberal versions or riffs or imitations of the Nicaraguan poet Rubén Darío, and I'd like to start with that one first. Far Away, Rubén Darío. Ox I saw as a child, breath, little clouds of steam, vivid in the sun. Nicaragua, a fertile ranch, abundant, rhythms, tropic, dove in a forest of sound, wind, bird, bull, axe. The core of me are these, and these I praise. Yes, ox, lumbering, you evoke tender dawn, the milking hour when days were white and rose. And you, cooing mountain dove, recall April, May, when spring was all, was everything. And that is in the first section of the book. And the second piece I want to share with you tonight is dedicated to and addressed to a former student of mine whose name is Gregory Jen. Gregory graduated from the University of Notre Dame in 2018. And the poem is titled Keogh Hall, which is a reference to one of the dormitories on the Notre Dame campus. And the poem has an epigraph which simply grounds the poem on November 9th, 2016, and the poem takes place on the campus of Notre Dame. Deplorables knocking at your door, he shouted the day after. Build the wall. We're building a wall around your room. Minutes felt like hours. Cowards, you managed catching a glimpse by cracking your door. There were 3 of them scurrying down the hall, their faces obscured. Your back against the wall, you slid to the floor. Hail Mary, you began, whispering to yourself, and back they came, their laughter louder. Minutes felt like hours, and the thumping in your chest, his fist pounding the door. And the third piece I want to read to you this evening is dedicated to the poet Carmen Calatayud, and it's the final poem in the book. Again, it's from After Ruben, and this poem is titled Creed. I soared across the sky to peer down at you all, each flap bringing me closer, your idea of heaven. No, I don't believe. My prayers a sheet of ice scrutinized by unforgiving heat. Now my words are air. Without remorse, I compose, hold you inside me. Saints are sliced in 4. I sing the rhythm of their days. Spirit endures, soft as a kiss, calling us to chorus, to convene antepasados en el desierto, to swallow what they teach. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Francisco Aragón. This is the Red Hen Press Poetry Hour brought to you by The Broad at Home. And I remind you that Richard Blanco will be back in just a few minutes for the final moment. If you have a question, ask. Just some shout outs to Rochelle Newman Carrasco, who's here. Sorry if I don't pronounce your names right. Ali Brimhall, Chris Carmen. And yes, it's okay to ask if some of our poets are single, like Jay Fly asked if Blas Falconer is single. Apparently, he is not. Sarah Butler, hello. Katsy Chappelle, Liz Campiard. And I think that I'm finding this evening there seems to be a bit of a rum theme. Melissa Dagodag her husband is from Puerto Rico and is a rum connoisseur. So that rum is the theme for tonight, and Hi Lorraine, and Harlan Rotblatt is there. Okay. All right. So next we have on tape Gaylord Brewer.
Hi, everyone. This is Gaylord Brewer down in the bunker in rural Tennessee. Hope you're well. We're hanging in there just fine. I think you can see from the opening titles, this is going to be a video with a high level of technological skill. We're going to read two brief pork-centric poems. I'm not saying that's the answer to all our problems, but it's a start, and it could be a solace. First poem is called Worship the Pig. Holy loin, blessed shoulder, belly, fat back, cutlet. Sacrament of rib, ham, jowl, and hock. Snout to tail, border to border, sing loud of head cheese. Pickled feet, crispy ear, of pancetta, lardo, prosciutto, of sausage and casing. Holy phrases. Denomination of bacon, order of the rump, sect of the crown rib, deep cult of the crackling. All praise be thy earthly flesh, thy sweet white fat well salted, prepared for our good and greasy consumption. Turned on spit for the faithful, buried in hot, covered grave, tended by priestly ritual in a pit of smoking embers. Pig oink, split belly with blade, pig squeal, severed head, pig die. We love the blood, bone, blackened skin, love the pig. We dance, we pray, we dig in. Bowed at table, we raise the wondrous flesh to lips. Eat in thanks, pig, hallelujah. And this shorter piece is more specifically to our bacon theme. I think that the title speaks to our mornings lately. Solution to a morning of little possibility, frying bacon. Get the big skillet from its hook. Peel off one onion strip at a time, butchered and cured down by the road by some old boys who worship the pig. And load that thing up over medium-high heat. Get your hands greasy, deep in the pour. Stand over it, working the rhythms until your glass is steam, your tongue's wagging in a wet mouth. Let it splatter. Let it burn. Stain. Make an ungodly mess. Forget about the menu. Bacon takes care of bacon. The unctuous agency of pork, the holy salt flesh and sweet fat better than Jesus and Elvis rolled together. Get the whole house smelling good. The dog on high alert. Damn it, son. This may be the best day of your wasted life. So there are some possibilities. I was going to take you on a little tour around the writing room, which has never been filmed before to my recollection, but I think the technology again suggests maybe I just bring a few of these little tchotchkes to you. Instead, I just grabbed a few little items that have always brought me luck. Here's my little, Vladimir and Bill Matryoshkas. They get very interesting inside, the deeper you get, believe me. Here's a little, speaking of the pig, there's a little faience china, very pretty. Some Schwein Sauvage. Good luck piece. Here's, you guys probably don't know this. I make these occasionally little grotesque clay heads. They're kind of fun, bring me a lot of pleasure. Here you go. Yeah, nice, isn't it? He's feeling it. And let's see what we got. Okay, here's the Black Virgin, glow in the dark from Concerat. Come back tonight. She'll be looking good. And I guess you probably have one of these nearby. Also, my Mr. Bean solar-powered bobblehead. I never get through any kind of time of distress without him. And I hope you have yours nearby. And here, okay, lastly, here you go. The Rambo duality that we deal with every day, really, and struggle through. I'm looking in the camera and I see over my shoulder there's St. Francis, patron saint of animals and the environment. And we could use his help these days. I think he's looking looking over us the best that he can. This is the point where I was supposed to show you my dog and bring her in, but she took off just a second I started filming, wanted no part of any of this. So I quickly grabbed my Lucy the Early Years compilation, which I'm sure you have on hand as well, just to give you a quick shot of her beauty and vanity. My girl just turned, she's a kid here, but she just turned 11, and she's still looking good. She's still quite beautiful, with occasional questionable attitude toward her daddy, but we have to deal with that as we will. That's it, guys. That's my 5 minutes of silliness. I really hope you're well. We'll get through this. I'm going to see you on the other side. I hope you have your matryoshkas and tchotchkas of the soul together with you, taking care of each other. And when I do see you, we'll have a party. We'll raise some fantastic noise together. So be well, and ciao for now. Thanks.
Well, I think there's a lot of bacon talk that's happening. It was so fantastic of Gaylord and oh my goodness, yes, some people, yeah, we're vegetarians are rethinking that. Petrie, some people had bacon in the morning. It was also Rambo versus Rambo. Who would win from Kazim Ali? That's Rambo versus Rimbaud. Very, very fascinating. This is the Red Hen Press Poetry Hour. And now, brought to you by Broad at Home. Last but not least, before we bring back Richard Blanco, and there's some interesting questions coming here, can please welcome into your homes, if you will, Kim Dower.
Hi, everybody. I don't have rum tonight, but I have a quarantini. So I toast to everybody watching tonight and my fellow poets and Red Hen Press and Sandra, thank you for a beautiful show. And so I have been writing every day, one, sometimes two poems about our quarantinis, self-distancing, and I'm going to read one to you tonight. These are new. This is a new poem. It's called Day 9 of Self-Isolation. I squat on a turquoise blue towel on the bathroom floor. I remember learning women in faraway lands and other cultures give birth this way, but in fact, even here in America, it's a good position for safe birth. There is no baby inside me, but I imagine an 8-pounder plowing through my canal, my hands poised, ready to receive him. I don't know why I'm doing this, except during this period of social distancing, I think having an infant to care for might be a fun distraction. When he comes out, he'll be perfect. Not even any blood to wash, no cord to cut. And since I only have cuticle scissors, that will be a huge relief. He may even have a full head of hair, slide out holding his own packet of diapers and perhaps a little bunny he played with in my womb. It's getting hot in here. I should crack the window. I don't know how long it'll take to deliver since there really is no him. These days are long and I'm getting bored. Experts say we should try doing something new, baking, for example, or meditating. For now, I will stay put on my turquoise towel on the bathroom floor for as long as it takes as I wait for my imaginary water to break. So I'm going to read two poems from my latest book, which is called Sunbathing on Tyrone Power's Grave. And the first poem in the book is called He Said I Wrote About Death. And the poem wrote 2 or 3 years ago seems to have a new meaning today for so many of us. He said I wrote about death, and I didn't mean to. This was not my intent. I meant to say how I loved the birds, how watching them lift off the branches, hearing their song, helps me get through the gray morning. When I wrote about how they crash into the small, dark places that only birds can fit through, layers of night sky, pipes through drains, how I've seen them splayed across gutters, piles of feathers stuck together by dried blood, how once my car ran over a sparrow, though I swerved. The road was narrow, the bird not quick enough. Dragged it under my tire as I drove to forget, bird disappearing part by part, beak, slender feet, fretful, hot. I did not mean to write about death, but rather how when something dies, we remember who we love. And we die a little too. We who are still breathing, we who still have the energy to survive. And I'm gonna end, my third poem is called Unruly Ora. And this is for all of us who miss just going to the store and talking to the people around us and the cashiers. And I have a favorite health food store out in Los Angeles. And I used to go there a lot. And this poem was written after a visit there. It's called Unruly Ora. The cashier at the health food store tells me I have a beautiful aura. Wait, I tell her. If you want to see a really beautiful aura, wait until I've taken my Renew Life Ultimate Flora probiotic. After that, my aura will knock your socks off. She smiles at me and rings me up. My money has a beautiful aura, too. My dollar bills float out of my pink wallet. The man behind me swells from the heat I generate. Each step I take brings me closer to God, the final, fabulous aura. Take my hand, I tell her. Squeeze my aura. It's hungry and looking for someone to devour. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. Liz Camfjord says, yay, Kim. So wonderful, so wonderful. Now we're going to bring back Richard Blanco to help us close. I just want to say, Kazum said Rambo versus Rambo versus Rimbaud. And Emma Trella says Rambo for sure. And Madstein Woods, Richard has been following you since the Obama inauguration, has just been a fan the entire time and is thrilled to be here with us.
Yeah.
So there's, I'm going to ask you two questions that have come up. I think one is kind of a silly and fun one that I'll say, and then one is a more serious one, but they come up and we do not lead in on it. Harlan Rotblatt had said, Richard Blanco, if we were able to elect, and first I had to stop, Sandra's pandemic smiting smile as our president. First, I was a little scared about that. I think I really the wrong lipstick tonight has been wet. What poem would you write for its inauguration? I think it's the lipstick. But then perhaps the more serious question is from Liz Camfjord. Has your book, How to Love a Country, been adopted for school courses? And also, and Jay Fly asks, are you single?
Well, you know, I was a little jealous of that one about Blas. I wasn't going to say nothing. No, it's interesting. Penguin Random House, which distributes the book, was the first poetry book they ever put on not for high school, but with the first book that they put on their list for first year experience. And it has the memoir has gotten picked up for several first year freshman college experience. And I'm just thinking it's time for poetry to be part of that conversation and those first year experiences. I mean, not to diss my prose writer brethren, but like we need poetry right now, right? So I'm hopeful. The paperback just came out, so we're trying to get more into the academic world. And I work as the education ambassador for the Academy of American Poets, and that's one of the things I work very closely with teachers and trying to get them to embrace poetry in ways that are fresh and new and all that. So hopefully, yeah, fingers crossed. I don't want to let the inaugural poem thing like slip by. I don't know what I would write, but I would know the last line would be something like, take out your compacts and put on your lipstick. Something like that. I mean, lipstick could unite the whole world.
Art, your lipstick and mine were one. Yes, I love that. Okay, well, we'll hold you to it. And Amy Wack also gives a shout out. Just usually in UK poetry editor Sarah Books San Diego says hello. So any last thought for the evening before? Actually, one more quick question. Donald Petrie, what is the most interesting book on the bookshelf behind you, Richard?
Oh my gosh. This is all a virtual, like it's a green screen. I have no books behind me. I gotta say, I mean, outside of the poetry books that I love and the old, I'm not going to give that kind of sort of expected answer maybe, but, I read a lot of psycho-spiritual books, a lot of books on philosophy. And one of the books that I keep on been coming back to all my life since my fresh sophomore college days was Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. That book has saved my life so many times. And it's just an amazing book. And I just realized that Beacon Press, which is who I'm with now, was the first person to publish that book that was rejected, like by God knows how many presses. And it's, I think, the 30 or 40-year anniversary now of that book. And so it was, I mean, it was kind of just a serendipitous moment, but that to me is probably the most important book in my shelf, believe it or not. And outside of poetry, poetry for different reasons, for my craft and what I try to do and for my life, but outside of that realm, definitely that book has saved my life.
Well, if you could say, what is the one thing from that Viktor Frankl book that either hit you or was a different idea?
There's one thing that I'm going through with right now. That we may all be going through right now. So to give you a little background, he spent his life, spent a lot of time in concentration camp and came out of it. And the idea that life is not conditional. That life is either worth it or it's not. That our happiness does not depend on conditions, whether you got that book published or that poem published, whether the stock market is booming or not booming, whether we're in social distance, that either life has meaning or it doesn't. And every time I start doubting that sense of like, oh, gee, I didn't get that Guggenheim, or like, this or the other, I'm like, does your life have meaning? And that's the way he realized the only way he could survive the concentration camp was like, no, life intrinsically has meaning, no matter what we go through. And either you believe that or you don't. And then all bets are off. And it's that every time I'm feeling down about something or like, crying on the yacht, I'm like, no, it has meaning. Our existence has meaning. And I think that speaks to the resiliency of the human spirit, something that we need to, that I think we're all touching upon and tapping into right now. That sense of, I am very proud of us in some ways. I mean, here we are doing this, here we are creating and recreating something to fill in this madness, right? I'm very proud of what humans have, how they've risen to the occasion. I mean, this is unprecedented. I mean, and it's so, in that way, I think these moments also make us realize, again, either life has meaning or it doesn't. And the circumstances don't matter. It is what you make out of it. And I guess those are my closing words too, in a way. And I think I think that's what poets ultimately are always thinking about too, right? I mean, that ultimateness of being, right? It's like song, it's primordial. It's like that's what we're doing all the time, whether the most casual observation or even the broadest stroke of something that we're looking at. We live with that question all the time because I guess that's what poetry does. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Richard. Just really amazing and very, very, very moving. And I think it really just resonates so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, this has been great. Thanks, everyone. And thanks for that last question. That was like, it looks like we planted that one. But God, it's so much fun. This is really fun. I mean, it's fun, great, and moving. And yeah, all of you out there, just let's keep on doing this, and let's just continue to do what we can together. And let's not forget, and let's do this more often. I mean, you don't have to fly halfway around the country to go have a poetry reading anymore, right? We're realizing those things are very important and great. And you don't need to, you can have a workshop online. We can connect in different ways. Silver lining, I guess. But it's been a pleasure, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Richard Blanco, an Obama inaugural poet who can now enjoy his quarantini, even though he wishes it were a martini. That's it for the Red Hen Press Poetry Hour this week, brought to you by Broad at Home. Please be sure to follow Red Hen Press and the Broad Stage on all social media. Go to redhenpress.org, buy all their books, and tune in tomorrow, Saturday at 11 a.m. for Broad Music Mornings, starring Sean Amos, the Reverend Sean Amos, right here. And join us next week, Saturday at 8, when our featured poet will be Allison Joseph. I'm Sandra Tsing Loh with my rather too bricky lipstick. I'll take it up for next time, I think. Good night.